Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between keeping the peace and getting what you want? A moment where a conflict with someone you care about puts everything on the line. It's a tough spot to be in, and it's a story as old as time itself. Today, we're re-diving into an ancient story that has so much to teach us about navigating these exact situations. It's the story of Abram and Lot, a story about family, faith, and the difficult choices that shape our lives. After God called Abram to leave his homeland, a place he knew his entire life, he embarked on a journey into the unknown. He wasn't alone. With him were his wife, Sarai, his nephew, Lot, and all their possessions. This wasn't just a simple move, it was an act of immense faith. God had made a promise to Abram, a new land, a great nation, and a future filled with blessings. So, they traveled together, a caravan of hope and trust, moving through the land of Canaan. They pitched their tents, built altars, and started to build their lives in this new place, side by side, family bound together on a shared adventure. Imagine the conversations they must have had under the stars, dreaming about the future God had promised. As the years went by, God's blessing was evident. Both Abram and Lot prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Their wealth wasn't just in silver and gold. It was visible in the vast flocks of sheep and herds of cattle that grazed the hillsides. They had so many animals and so many servants to care for them that their encampments grew larger and larger. It was a picture of incredible success, a testament to God's faithfulness. But with great blessing came an unexpected challenge. The land, as vast as it seemed, began to feel small. The resources, the grass for grazing, the water from the wells were finite. The very blessings they had received started to create a strain, stretching their ability to coexist peacefully in the same area. The land simply couldn't support the sheer number of animals and people belonging to both Abram and Lot. What was once a symbol of unity was now becoming a source of tension. Soon, that underlying tension erupted into open conflict. It wasn't Abram and Lot themselves who were fighting, at least not at first. It was their employees, their herdsmen. Out in the fields, arguments broke out. "This is our pasture," one group would shout. "We were here first," another would retort. Fights over access to wells became a daily occurrence. The peace that had defined their journey together was slipping away, replaced by bickering and rivalry. Imagine Abram hearing these reports, his heart growing heavy. This wasn't what he had envisioned. The very family he had brought with him at this journey of faith was now at odds. The constant quarreling threatened to tear apart the fabric of their relationship. The atmosphere grew thick with resentment, and a difficult decision had to be made before the conflict consumed them completely. Abram, seeing the growing division, knew he had to act. He was the elder, the patriarch, the one to whom God had given the original promise. By all cultural rights, he could have pulled rank, demanded his way, and put Lot in his place. But Abram valued his relationship with his nephew more than his own rights or possessions. He sought out Lot, not with anger, but with a heart full of wisdom and a desire for peace. He pulled him aside and said, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are close relatives." It's such a powerful and simple statement. We are family. Abram then made an astonishingly generous offer. "Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." He gave the choice to Lot. He willingly put himself in a position of potential disadvantage for the sake of preserving peace. This wasn't weakness, it was profound strength and humility. Lot stood and looked out over the landscape. He had a major decision to make, one that would chart the course for his future. Abram had given him the first pick, a generous and unexpected gift. To the east, Lot saw the plain of the Jordan. It was incredibly lush, well-watered everywhere, like a paradise. The Bible describes it as being like the garden of the Lord, or like the fertile land of Egypt he had seen. It was green, vibrant, and promised prosperity. It was the obvious choice from a worldly perspective. To the west, the land was different. It was hill country, more rugged, drier, and less immediately appealing. It would require more work and perhaps held less obvious promise for a man whose wealth was in livestock. Lot's eyes were fixed on the lush valley. He saw immediate advantage, comfort, and wealth. He chose based on what his eyes could see, on the apparent, tangible benefits. And so, he chose the Jordan Valley, moving his tents toward the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, places that the Bible ominously notes were filled with wickedness. So Lot and his entire camp packed up and headed east, towards the green valley he had chosen. Abram stood and watched them go. Imagine the mix of emotions. He must have felt sadness at the separation, but also peace in his decision to prioritize their relationship over land. He was left with the less desirable portion, the hill country of Canaan. From a human point of view, it looked like he had lost. He had given away the better deal. The land he was left with seemed less fertile, less promising. But Abram's perspective wasn't limited to what he could see with his eyes. His foundation wasn't built on fertile soil or abundant water, but on the unwavering promise of God. He stayed in Canaan, not because it was the best-looking option, but because he was trusting in a promise that was far greater than any piece of real estate. He chose faith over sight. It was in this moment, after Lot had departed, after Abram had acted in humility and faith, that God met with him again. It's as if God waited for Abram to make the right choice before reaffirming his covenant. He spoke to Abram, saying, "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see will give to you and your offspring forever." What a powerful moment. God was showing Abram that his inheritance wasn't limited by Lot's choice or the visible quality of the land. God's promise encompassed everything. Then, God added another layer to the promise. "I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth," so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Abram may have just watched his family shrink, but God promised him a family so vast it would be uncountable. It was a profound reassurance that Abram's future, his security, and his legacy did not depend on what he could grasp, but on what God would give. With this renewed promise echoing in his heart, Abram once again demonstrated his faith through action. He moved his tents and went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron. And there, in that place, he did what he had done so many times before on his journey. He built an altar to the Lord. This act of worship was significant. It was a physical declaration of his trust and dependence on God. Building an altar was his way of saying, "This land is yours, my life is yours, my future is in your hands." He had chosen peace over conflict with Lot. He had chosen faith in Goddess and seen promise over the fear of getting the short end of the stick. And he had chosen to trust God's provision over his own greedy ambition. In Hebron, Abram didn't just settle on a piece of land. He settled his heart once more in complete reliance on God. As we look back on this story, we see it's about so much more than two men dividing up land. It's a powerful lesson about the choices we make every day. Lot chose based on what looked best for himself in the short term. He saw the lush, green valley and grabbed it. His choice was driven by sight and self-interest, but it led him to camp near Sodom and Gomorrah, a decision that would have disastrous consequences later on. Abram, on the other hand, made a different kind of choice. He chose to trust God's promise, even when it meant letting go of what looked like the better option. He prioritized his relationship with his nephew and chose peace over winning an argument or claiming his rights. His choice was driven by faith and humility. This story invites us to ask ourselves, when we face conflict, what drives our decisions? Are we focused on what we can see and get for ourselves, or are we willing to trust in something bigger? The lesson from Abram and Lot's separation is incredibly relevant for us today. We all face conflicts with family, friends, or co-workers that can threaten to divide us. In those moments, we have a choice. We can be like Lot, grabbing for what seems best for us, insisting on our rights, and potentially damaging relationships in the process. Or we can be like Abram, choosing humility, generosity, and peace. Abram's faith teaches us that true blessing doesn't come from fighting for the best-looking option. It comes from trusting that God's plan and His promises are far greater than anything we could orchestrate for ourselves. When we choose to let go of our pride, to prioritize peace, and to place our trust in a faithful God, we open the door for blessings we could never have imagined. Abram's story is a timeless reminder that a life of faith is often a life of choosing the harder, less obvious path, knowing that it leads to a far greater reward. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of the great stories of faith. If this message resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. We'd love to have you as part of our community.